The sun hung like a copper coin melting in the sky, its heat pressing down on the cracked earth with the weight of 1,000 irons. Sarah Crawford stumbled through the sagebrush, her boots kicking up dust that coated her throat, turned every breath into a knife scraping raw flesh. Her son clutched to her hip, his small body limp as wet cloth, his fever burning through the thin fabric of her dress into her ribs like a brand. The boy was 4 years old. Thomas, his name, though she'd taken to calling him Tommy in the brief moments when he was awake enough to hear her. His blonde hair stuck to his scalp, dark with sweat. His lips cracked and bleeding, his eyes rolled back showing only whites when she tried to get him to drink from the near-empty canteen. She'd lost the wagon train 2 days back. Or was it 3? Time had become a smear of heat and thirst and the terrible weight of her son growing heavier with each mile. The oxen had collapsed first, their tongues swollen black, protruding from their mouths like obscene accusations. Then the wagon tongue had cracked, splitting down the middle when she tried to continue on foot. Her husband's voice still echoed in her skull. Samuel Crawford, merchant and fool, who dragged them west on promises of California gold, of orchards heavy with fruit, of a future bright as new coins. He'd died of cholera 3 weeks into the journey, his last words a bubbling apology that meant nothing, could change nothing. His body wrapped in canvas and buried in unmarked earth somewhere behind them. The wagon master, Josiah Pike, had been sympathetic at first, his weathered face creasing with what might have been genuine concern. But sympathy dried up fast when sickness followed her, when Tommy's fever spiked and the other families started whispering about contagion, about bad luck, about a widow woman being a curse on any decent God-fearing company. They'd voted her out, democratic-like, civilized people. Pike's voice tight with false regret as he handed her a sack of hardtack and jerky, told her there was a trading post maybe 15 miles south, told her to follow the sun and pray she was quick about it. The dust from their wagons had hung in the air long after they'd disappeared over the ridge, a brown curtain separating her from any hope of mercy. That was yesterday morning. Now the sun was dropping toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of rust and blood, and she was still walking, still carrying Tommy, still refusing to let the desert take what was hers. Every step was a negotiation, her legs threatening mutiny, her back screaming, her arms numb except for the terrible burning where Tommy's fever seeped into her. The land stretched endlessly. Flat scrubland dotted with Joshua trees that raised their twisted arms like prophets announcing doom. Hills rose in the distance, purple shadows promising nothing. Rattlesnakes buzzed warnings from beneath rocks, their sound a death rattle that made her steps careful, measured, even as exhaustion made her clumsy. She tried to remember prayers her mother had taught her, words about valleys of shadow, about still waters. But they turned to dust in her mouth, meaningless sounds that the heat devoured before they reached heaven. She tried to remember Samuel's face but could only see him as he'd been at the end, hollow-eyed and broken, nothing like the confident man who'd sold his shop in Philadelphia, who'd promised her the world. Tommy whimpered, a sound so faint it was almost lost in the whisper of wind through sage. She stopped, pressed her cracked lips to his forehead, tasting salt and sickness. "Hang on, baby," she croaked, her voice a stranger's rasp. "Just a little further. We'll find water, we'll find help. I promise you, I promise." But she was lying. She knew it. The land knew it. The sky knew it. There was no water, no help, no miracle waiting beyond the next rise. Only more desert, more heat, more slow death creeping closer with every labored breath. Her vision blurred at the edges, dark spots dancing, swimming like flies. She blinked hard, trying to clear them, but they persisted, growing larger. Her knees buckled and she caught herself on a boulder, its surface hot enough to sear her palm. She gasped, yanked her hand back, cradled Tommy tighter. Got to rest, she thought. Just for a minute. Just long enough to catch my breath. Just long enough to remember how to stand. She sank down in the meager shade of a twisted juniper tree, its branches offering barely enough shadow to cover Tommy's face. She laid him on the ground, his body so still, so terribly still, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. She pulled the canteen from her belt, shook it, heard the pathetic slosh of maybe a mouthful left. She wet her fingers, dribbled water onto Tommy's lips, watched his tongue try to catch the drops, his eyes fluttering but not opening. She wanted to drink, wanted it so badly her throat felt like it was closing, but she stopped herself, screwed the cap back on, saved it for him. For the next time. For however many next times they had left. The sun continued its descent and Sarah's head dropped forward, her chin touching her chest. Sleep pulled at her, heavy and insistent, but she fought it, knew if she slept now she might not wake, might leave Tommy alone to face whatever came next. Vultures maybe. Or coyotes. Or just the endless, patient heat. She forced her eyes open, scanned the horizon searching for anything. Water. Smoke. Another human being, even a hostile one. At least that would mean she wasn't alone, that the world still contained people, even if they meant her harm. That's when she saw him. A figure on horseback, dark against the red sky, moving along a ridge maybe half a mile distant. She couldn't make out details, just the shape, silhouette tall and straight in the saddle, not hurrying but not dawdling either. Moving with purpose through the dying light. Help, she tried to shout, but her voice cracked, emerged as barely a whisper. She struggled to her feet, waved her arms over her head. Here. Over here. Please, please see us. The figure kept moving, parallel to her path, showing no sign he'd noticed her. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, desperation giving her strength she didn't know she had. She grabbed a piece of dried juniper branch, struck it against the rock trying to make sparks, trying to start a signal fire. But the wood was too old, too dry. It crumbled in her hands, leaving only splinters. She tried to shout again, managed slightly more volume this time. Help. Please. My son, he's sick. Please. The figure stopped. She saw it clearly, the horse pulling up, the rider's head turning in her direction. She waved again, more frantically, her arm cutting arcs through the air that must have caught the last rays of sunlight. For a long moment, nothing happened. The figure sat motionless, just watching. Then he turned his horse, started riding toward her. Not fast, but steady, closing the distance with the same unhurried purpose. Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed beside Tommy, her hand finding his, checking for the pulse in his throat, finding it thready but still there. Thank God, she breathed. Thank God, someone's coming, baby. Someone's coming to help. The rider drew closer and she could make out more details. He was riding a paint horse, black and white patches that seemed to shift in the uncertain light. He wore buckskins, dark with age and use. His hair long and black, hanging loose past his shoulders. A rifle rested across his saddle horn, casual but ready. He pulled up about 20 feet away and Sarah got her first clear look at him. He was Comanche, she realized, seeing the copper tone of his skin, the way he sat his horse like they were one creature, the beadwork on his rifle scabbard. Her heart lurched, torn between relief that anyone had found them and fear of what stories she'd heard around wagon train fires. Stories of raids and scalping and women taken captive. But he didn't look violent. Didn't have war paint or feathers or any of the savage decorations the stories always mentioned. He just looked weathered, hard the way the land was hard. His face lined and serious, dark eyes that took in everything, her torn dress, her sun-blistered skin, Tommy's still form on the ground. She tried to speak but her throat had closed up entirely, fear and thirst stealing her voice. She just stared up at him, her hand protective on Tommy's chest, waiting for him to decide what happened next. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his moccasins touching ground without sound. He walked toward them, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. Sarah tensed, ready to fight if she had to, ready to die protecting Tommy if that's what it took. He knelt beside them, studied Tommy with an intensity that was almost medical. His hand reached out and Sarah flinched, but he just touched Tommy's forehead, held his fingers there for a long moment, feeling the heat, reading something she couldn't interpret. "Fever," he said, his voice low and rough, like stones grinding together. His English perfect, no accent, just that quality of someone who doesn't speak often, doesn't waste words. 3 days, maybe 4. She nodded, found her voice somewhere deep in her chest. Yes. 3 days. The wagon train left us. Said we were bad luck. Said he might be contagious. The man grunted, a sound that might have been disgust, might have been understanding. Hard to tell. He stood, walked back to his horse, pulled a water skin from his saddle, brought it back, unstopped it and handed it to her. "Drink," he said when she hesitated, just stared at the offering. "Drink, then give him small sips. Not too much or he'll vomit." She took the water skin with shaking hands, raised it to her lips. The water was warm, tasted of leather, but it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever experienced. She forced herself to stop after a few swallows, remembered his warning, turned to Tommy, lifted his head and let tiny amounts trickle into his mouth. The man watched, then moved away, started gathering dried brush and deadwood with efficient movements. He cleared a small area of ground, arranged the wood in a careful structure, pulled a fire steel from his belt and struck sparks into a nest of dry grass. Within moments, flames were licking upward, growing, spreading warmth that felt like salvation even in the evening heat. He returned to his horse, retrieved a bundle wrapped in hide, unrolled it to reveal dried meat, some kind of root vegetables, a small clay pot. He filled the pot with water from his water skin, added the vegetables, hung it over the fire on a makeshift tripod of green branches. Sarah watched all this in a daze, unable to quite believe it was happening, unable to shake the feeling she might be hallucinating, that she'd died beside that juniper tree and this was some fever dream her mind had conjured as consciousness slipped away. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice stronger now that she'd had water. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "John Longknife," he said after a pause, like he'd had to remember, like the name was something he didn't use often. "I'm Sarah Crawford. This is my son, Tommy. We were with a wagon train but they left us. My husband died of cholera and Tommy got sick and they voted us out. Said we were bad luck." John Longknife nodded once, like this was a story he'd heard before, like people casting out their sick was nothing new under this brutal sun. He stirred the pot over the fire, added some dried herbs from a pouch at his belt. The smell that rose up was sharp, medicinal. "Eucalyptus maybe, or sage." "You know medicine?" she asked, hope creeping into her voice. Maybe too much hope, but she couldn't help it. "Some," he said. "My mother was a healer. Taught me plants, roots. What helps, what hurts. This will bring his fever down. Won't cure whatever sickness he has, but it'll give him a chance. Give his body time to fight." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, the first moisture she'd had for tears in days. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. I thought we were going to die out here. I thought I'd watch him die and then follow, and no one would ever know what happened to us." "Many people die out here," John said, his tone matter-of-fact, not cruel, just honest. "Desert doesn't care about your plans. Doesn't care about your God or your prayers. It just takes what it takes." They sat in silence after that, Sarah holding Tommy, John tending his medicine brew. The sun finished setting, painting the sky in purples and deep blues, stars beginning to appear one by one until the heavens were crowded with light. More stars than she'd ever seen in Philadelphia. More than seemed possible. When the brew was ready, John poured some into a small cup, let it cool, then brought it to Sarah. "Show me how much you gave him water," he said. She demonstrated the tiny sips, the careful measured amounts. He nodded. Good. Same with this. Little bits. Let his stomach accept it before you give more. Tommy took the medicine without waking, his throat working reflexively, his face twitching like he was dreaming. Sarah gave him several small doses, then stopped, waiting to see if he'd keep it down. John had moved back to the fire, was roasting some of the dried meat on sticks. The smell made Sarah's stomach cramp, reminded her she hadn't eaten since the hardtack that morning, hadn't eaten a real meal in days. He handed her a piece without comment and she ate it slowly, forcing herself not to gobble it down, not to make herself sick. "Why did you help us?" she asked after she'd finished, needing to understand, needing to know if there was kindness left in the world or if this was just an anomaly, a strange mercy she'd never see again. John didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire, his face unreadable in the dancing light. Finally he said, "I had a son once. Fever took him. 10 summers ago. I couldn't save him. Didn't know the medicines then. My wife died the following winter. Of grief. Of the cold. Of losing what mattered most." Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she said, the words inadequate but all she had. He shrugged one shoulder, a gesture that tried to dismiss it but didn't quite succeed. "Past is past. Can't change it. Can only choose what you do now, today. And today I found a woman and a sick boy in the desert, and I knew medicines that might help." Seemed simple. "You're a good man," Sarah said, meaning it. John's mouth twisted, not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. "Good, bad. Those are words for people who have time to think about such things. Out here, there's only alive and dead. I choose alive when I can." They fell silent again, the fire crackling between them. Tommy's breathing seemed slightly easier, Sarah thought. Less labored maybe, or maybe she was just desperate to believe the medicine was working. She laid him on a blanket John had provided, tucked it around him like she'd done every night of his short life. She must have dozed off, because when she opened her eyes the fire had burned down to coals and the sky had that deep black quality that comes in the hours before dawn. John sat on the far side of the coals, his rifle across his knees, his eyes scanning the darkness, alert and watchful. "Sorry," she mumbled, pushing herself up, wincing at the stiffness in her back. "I didn't mean to fall asleep." "Sleep is good," John said without looking at her. "You need strength for tomorrow. We have a long ride." "Ride to where?" she asked. "Trading post," he said. 2 days north. There's a doctor there. White man, but he knows his work better than most. He can help your son more than I can." Sarah's heart leaped. "We're going there? You're taking us?" John finally looked at her, his eyes reflecting the coal's dim glow. "Yes. I'm taking you. Unless you'd rather stay here. Alone." "No, no, please," she said, relief flooding through her, so intense it made her dizzy. "I can't thank you enough. I don't have money, don't have anything to pay you, but if there's ever anything I can do." He waved away her words with one hand. "Payment is for merchants, for men who trade goods. I'm not helping you for payment. I'm helping because your son is sick and I have medicine. Because you need to get somewhere safe and I know the way. That's all." The simplicity of it, the plain truth in his voice, made Sarah want to cry again. This stranger, this man who owed her nothing, who belonged to a people her people had treated with violence and betrayal, was saving her life, saving Tommy's life, asking nothing in return. They set out before dawn, John lifting Tommy with surprising gentleness, settling the boy in front of Sarah on the paint horse, then swinging up behind them. His arms on either side of her, holding the reins, his body a solid wall at her back. The horse moved smoothly, finding paths through the scrubland that Sarah never would have seen. John guided them north, following some internal compass, keeping them away from the worst of the rocky terrain, the worst of the heat as the sun climbed. They stopped at midday in the shade of a rock overhang that offered blessed relief from the glare. John rationed out water, gave Tommy more of the medicine, checked his fever with those careful, knowledgeable fingers. "He's fighting," Sarah said, hope creeping into her voice. "The fever's lower, isn't it?" "Yes," John agreed. "Lower, but not gone. He needs the doctor. Needs more than field medicine." They rode on through the afternoon, Tommy waking briefly, his eyes focusing on Sarah's face. "Mama," he whispered, his voice tiny and confused. "Where are we?" "We're safe, baby," she said, smoothing his hair back, kissing his forehead. "We're going to get you help. Just rest now. Just let the medicine work." Tommy's eyes drifted closed again, but Sarah felt encouraged, heard the difference in his breathing, saw color returning to his cheeks however faintly. That night they camped in a small canyon where a trickle of water ran between rocks. John showed Sarah how to refill their water skins, how to tell if water was safe to drink by looking for certain plants growing nearby. He shared more dried meat, more of that medicine brew, told her the names of the herbs he used: rattlesnake master for fever, yarrow root for infection, willow bark for pain. "You should write this down," Sarah said, watching him work. "Your knowledge is valuable. People would pay for it." John snorted softly. "People want doctors with certificates, with big words and clean hands. They don't want Indian medicine. Don't trust it, even when it works better than their mercury and bloodletting." "That's foolish," Sarah said. "People are foolish." "Yes," John agreed, his tone flat. "People are very foolish." On the second day of riding, they saw smoke on the horizon, thin gray columns rising against the blue. John tensed behind her, his body going rigid, his hand moving to his rifle. "What is it?" Sarah asked, fear creeping back into her voice. "Trouble," he said shortly. "We'll go around. Stay quiet. Keep your head down." But as they angled away from the smoke, riders appeared, cresting a hill to their east. 5 men on horseback, their hats marking them as whites, their rifles already drawn. Sarah's heart hammered. She felt John shift behind her, preparing for violence, preparing to defend them. The riders approached fast, their horses kicking up dust, their faces hard and suspicious. The leader was a big man, red-faced with a beard that hadn't been trimmed in weeks. His eyes were small, mean, scanning John with open hostility. "Hold up there," the leader shouted, his rifle pointing at John's chest. "You there, Indian. What's your business with that white woman?" John didn't answer, just kept the paint horse moving, steady and calm, trying to pass the riders without engagement. But they spread out, blocking the path, forming a wall of horseflesh and steel. "I asked you a question," the leader barked. "You steal that woman? Did you take her off a wagon train? Answer me or I'll shoot you down right here." "He's helping me," Sarah said quickly, her voice loud and clear, trying to defuse the situation. "My son is sick. My husband died of cholera. Our wagon train left us. Mr. Longknife found us in the desert. He's taking us to a trading post to see a doctor." The leader's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "That right?" he said, his tone mocking. "You just helping out of the goodness of your red heart? Or you got plans for this woman once you get her somewhere isolated?" Sarah felt John's anger like heat radiating from his body, felt his muscles bunch, preparing to fight. But his voice when he spoke stayed level, controlled. "No plans except to get her son to a doctor. Now move aside. Let us pass." The leader laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. The other riders joining in. "You don't give orders here, savage. We give the orders. And right now I'm ordering you to get off that horse, step away from the woman. Let us make sure she ain't been hurt, ain't been touched by your heathen hands." John's grip tightened on the reins. Sarah felt him calculating the odds. 5 armed men against 1. The woman and child caught in the crossfire. Her breath caught in her throat, fear and fury warring inside her. "Please," she said, addressing the leader directly. "Please just let us go. My son needs a doctor. Every minute we waste is a minute closer to losing him. If you have any decency, any humanity, you'll let us pass." The leader's eyes shifted to Tommy, taking in the boy's pale face, his labored breathing. Something flickered in that hard gaze. Maybe conscience. Maybe just calculation. He lowered his rifle slightly, his jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. "All right," he said finally, his tone grudging. "You can pass. But I'm warning you, Indian. If I hear this woman or her boy came to harm, if I hear you did anything but take them straight to that trading post, I'll hunt you down myself. I'll make you wish you'd never been born. You understand me?" John nodded once, his face showing nothing. "Yes. I understand." The riders parted, their horses moving aside with obvious reluctance, their rifles still ready, still tracking John as he guided the paint horse through the gap. Sarah didn't breathe, didn't move until they were 100 yards past the men, until the tension finally drained from John's back. "Thank you," she whispered once they were alone again. "For not fighting. For keeping us safe." John grunted. Those men were looking for an excuse to kill an Indian today. Any Indian. Didn't matter if I'd done wrong or right. They wanted blood. Wanted to feel like big men protecting white women from the savage threat. Sarah felt shame burn in her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, knowing it wasn't enough, knowing nothing could be enough for generations of that kind of hate. "Not your fault," John said, his tone gentler than before. "You didn't make them that way. The world did. Fear did. Ignorance did. You're just trying to save your son. That's all anyone should have to do. Just save the people they love." The trading post appeared on the 3rd day, a cluster of rough buildings sprawled around a central yard. Wagons and horses tied outside, men loading supplies, shouting orders. The noise and activity after days of silence was overwhelming. Sarah clutched Tommy tighter, her heart hammering with hope and fear. John rode straight to the largest building, dismounted and helped Sarah down. Her legs nearly buckled, unused to standing after so long on horseback. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then pushed open the door. Inside was chaos. Shelves crammed with goods, barrels of flour and beans, hanging meat and leather goods. A counter where a fat man argued prices with a customer. John moved through it all with purpose, heading to a door at the back. He knocked once, then entered without waiting for permission. A man looked up from a desk covered in papers and bottles. He was middle-aged, spectacled, his sleeves rolled up revealing forearms stained with various medicines. His expression moved from annoyance to surprise to concern as he took in the scene. "John," he said, his voice neutral, wary. "What brings you here?" "Sick child," John said, gesturing to Tommy. "Fever. 3 days, maybe 4. I've given him rattlesnake master, yarrow root, willow bark. The fever's down but not broken. He needs more than I can do." The doctor rose immediately, his professional instincts overriding whatever history he had with John. "Bring him here," he said, indicating an examination table covered with a clean sheet. "Lay him down carefully." Sarah obeyed, her hands shaking as she settled Tommy on the table. The doctor lit a lamp, adjusted it to shine on Tommy's face, began his examination. Checking the boy's pulse, his throat, his chest. Listening with a wooden stethoscope, asking Sarah questions about symptoms, about when it started, about what Tommy had eaten and drunk. Finally the doctor straightened, his expression serious but not hopeless. "It's a lung fever," he said. "Probably from bad water, maybe from the dust. Pneumonia, specifically. The early stages. John's medicines kept it from getting worse, probably saved his life, truth be told. But he needs more. He needs sulfur powder, needs steam treatments, needs careful nursing for at least a week, maybe 2. Can you do that? Sarah asked, desperation making her voice break. Can you help him? The doctor nodded slowly, his eyes moving from Tommy to Sarah to John, then back. I can help him, he said. But it won't be cheap. Medicines cost money. My time costs money. And nursing care, that's extra on top. Sarah's heart sank. I don't have money, she admitted, her voice small. My husband had some savings, but they were in the wagon. I tried to bring everything but I could only carry so much, and I had to choose Tommy over gold, over everything. The doctor's face hardened. I'm sorry, he said, but I can't work for free. I have supplies to buy, bills to pay myself. If I treated every sick person who couldn't pay, I'd be bankrupt in a month. Please, Sarah begged, tears streaming down her face now. Please. I'll work. I'll do anything. Clean, scrub, laundry, cooking, whatever you need. Just please don't let my son die. Don't turn us away when we're this close. The doctor shook his head, his expression uncomfortable but unmoved. I'm sorry. I truly am. But business is business. I can't. John stepped forward, his hand reaching into a pouch at his belt. He pulled out a small leather bag, dropped it on the doctor's desk. It landed with a heavy thunk, coins clinking inside. That enough? John asked, his voice flat. The doctor opened the bag, his eyes widening as he saw the gold coins inside. Easily enough, he said, his tone changing entirely. This will cover everything. Treatment, medicines, nursing care for as long as needed. Where did you? John cut him off with a sharp gesture. Payment is payment. Questions aren't part of the deal. You treat the boy. You treat him well. You make sure he lives. Understood? The doctor nodded quickly, pocketing the bag. Understood. Absolutely. I'll start treatments immediately. He'll have the best care I can provide. Sarah turned to John, her mind reeling. You paid for him. Why would you do that? You don't even know us. John met her eyes, his expression unreadable. I told you. I had a son once, and I couldn't save him. But maybe I can save yours. Maybe that's enough. But that was gold, she protested. That was a fortune. Where did you even get? John raised a hand, stopping her questions. I trapped furs for years. Sold them. Saved the money. Didn't have anything to spend it on, nothing I wanted or needed. Just pieces of metal sitting in a bag. Now they're buying something that matters. A child's life. Seems like a better use than anything else I could think of. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't find words for what she felt. Gratitude, yes, but something deeper, something that acknowledged the enormous gift he'd given. Not just money, but hope, but a future for her son. Finally she just threw her arms around him, hugged him hard, ignoring the doctor's surprised expression, ignoring propriety, ignoring everything except the need to show this man what he meant, what he'd done. John stood stiff for a moment, then slowly, carefully, his arms came up and returned the embrace. Just briefly. Just enough. Then he stepped back, cleared his throat with obvious discomfort. I should go, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. You and your son are safe now. The doctor will take care of things. You'll be fine. Wait, Sarah said, panic flaring. Where will you go? What will you do? Back to the desert, John said with a shrug. Back to my life. Trapping, hunting, moving. It's what I know. Will I see you again? She asked, hating how desperate she sounded but unable to stop herself. John paused in the doorway, his back to her. "Maybe," he said, his voice quiet. "If the wind blows right. If the trails cross again. Maybe." Then he was gone, disappearing into the chaos of the trading post, leaving Sarah standing in the doctor's office holding her sick son, feeling like something important had just walked out of her life. Tommy recovered slowly over the next 2 weeks. Sarah stayed by his side, sleeping in a chair next to his bed, feeding him broth and medicine, watching color return to his cheeks, strength return to his limbs. The doctor was true to his word, providing excellent care, never once making her feel like a charity case. When Tommy was finally well enough to sit up, to eat solid food, to laugh at Sarah's silly faces, she knew they'd made it. They'd survived against odds that should have killed them. She asked around the trading post about John Longknife. Found he was known there, a loner who came in occasionally to trade furs. A man respected for his tracking skills, his knowledge of the desert. Feared a little too, for his silence, his refusal to bend to anyone's expectations. "He saved my son's life," Sarah told anyone who would listen. "He saved both our lives. He's a good man. A hero." Most people nodded politely, but she saw the skepticism in their eyes. Saw them dismiss it as a white woman's gratitude exaggerating the deeds of a helpful Indian. Not understanding the depth of it, the reality of what John had done. She stayed at the trading post for a month, helping the doctor with other patients, working in the general store to pay for room and board. Letters arrived from her sister back east, begging her to come home, to bring Tommy back to civilization, to safety. But Sarah found herself hesitating. Found herself scanning the horizon every morning, wondering if today would be the day John came riding back. Found herself unwilling to leave this place where he might find her, if he chose to return. It was late summer when he finally appeared, riding into the trading post yard at sunset, his paint horse laden with furs, his face as unreadable as ever. Sarah saw him from the store window and her heart leaped. She dropped the bolt of cloth she was measuring, ran outside without thinking, without caring who saw. "John," she called, running toward him, a smile spreading across her face. "You came back." He dismounted slowly, his movements careful, like he wasn't sure of his welcome. "Came to trade furs," he said, his tone neutral. "Needed supplies." Sarah stopped a few feet from him, suddenly unsure. "Was that the only reason?" she asked quietly. "Just business?" John looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since arriving. His eyes searching her face like he was reading something written there. "Maybe," he said finally. "Maybe I wanted to see how the boy was doing. Maybe I wondered if you'd stayed or gone back east to your people." "Tommy's wonderful," Sarah said, warmth flooding through her. "Completely recovered. Strong as ever. He asks about you sometimes. Calls you the medicine man who saved him." John's mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Hard to tell. "That's good," he said. "Children should grow strong. Should have the chance to become who they're meant to be." They stood there in the dusty yard, evening light painting everything gold, neither quite knowing what to say next. Sarah wanted to ask him to stay, wanted to tell him how much she thought about him, how much Tommy talked about him, how empty the days felt without his quiet presence. But before she could find the words, Tommy came running out of the boarding house, his legs pumping, his face bright with joy. "Mr. John," he shouted, launching himself at John's legs. "Mr. John, you came back." John caught him, steadied him with those same careful hands that had administered medicine, that had held reins, that had kept them all safe. "Hello, Tommy," he said, his voice softer than Sarah had ever heard it. "You're looking healthy." "I'm all better," Tommy said proudly. "Mama says you saved my life. Says you're the bravest man she ever met." John's eyes flicked to Sarah, something unreadable crossing his face. "Did she now?" Tommy nodded vigorously. Will you stay for supper, Mr. John? Please. Mama makes good stew now that I can eat again, and I can show you my drawings. I drew a picture of your horse. John hesitated. Sarah could see the war in him, the desire to stay fighting against whatever drove him to keep moving, to stay alone, stay safe from connection. Please, she said quietly, adding her voice to Tommy's. Just supper. Just a few hours. Surely you can spare that. John looked at her and something in his expression cracked, just slightly, showing the lonely man beneath the hard exterior. Just supper, he agreed, his voice rough. All right. Just supper. They ate together at the boarding house table, Tommy chattering endlessly about everything he'd seen and learned. John listening with the patience of someone unused to but appreciating the simple joy of a child's voice. Sarah watched them, feeling something shift inside her, some decision crystallizing. After Tommy fell asleep, Sarah and John sat on the porch watching stars emerge, the night warm and clear, the sounds of the trading post settling into evening quiet. I'm not going back east, Sarah said, breaking the silence. My sister wants me to. Says it's the proper thing to do, the safe thing. But I can't. I can't go back to Philadelphia, to cobblestones and parlors and pretending this never happened. John nodded, understanding in his silence. What will you do? He asked. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe stay here. Work for the doctor. He says I have a gift for nursing. Maybe homestead somewhere nearby. Raise Tommy where he can run free, where he can learn about the desert that nearly killed us and the man who saved us. John was quiet for a long time. Then, do you need help building a homestead? He asked, his voice careful, like he was stepping on ice, testing its strength. Sarah's heart hammered. Are you offering? She asked, barely breathing. John met her eyes. I'm offering friendship, he said clearly. Someone to help you get established. Someone who knows the land, knows what plants are safe, what water is clean. Someone who maybe comes around from time to time to check on you and Tommy, to make sure you're managing, to make sure you're safe. Just friendship? Sarah asked, holding his gaze. Just checking on us? John's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. I'm not a man who makes promises easy, he said. My people are hunted, pushed farther away every year. Any white woman seen with me is risking her reputation, risking worse. I won't bring that down on you and Tommy. Won't make you targets. I don't care about reputation, Sarah said fiercely. I care about what's real, what's true. And the truth is you're the best man I've ever known. You saved us when no one else would. You gave everything, expecting nothing. And if people have a problem with that, then those are people whose opinions don't matter to me. John studied her, like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing past the desperate mother, past the widow, past the white woman to the person underneath. Sarah, he said, her name tasting it like something rare. You're sure about this? Sure about throwing your lot in with someone like me? More sure than I've ever been about anything, she said, and that was true. Felt true bone deep, soul deep, the way nothing had felt true since Samuel died, since everything fell apart. All right then, John said, a real smile finally crossing his face, transforming it from stone to something warm, something alive. Then we'll build something that lasts. We'll carve out a piece of this desert and make it ours. Teach Tommy how to survive, how to thrive. And maybe, he paused, his hand reaching out to touch hers briefly, a butterfly's touch. Maybe we'll figure out what comes next. Together. Sarah took his hand, held it properly, felt the calluses and scars, felt the strength. Yes, she said. Yes, we will. They didn't marry immediately. That would have caused talk, would have made things harder. Instead, John helped her file a homestead claim on a piece of land near a reliable spring. Helped her build a cabin, solid and strong, with thick walls and a good roof. He taught her to plant crops that would survive the heat, taught her to hunt small game, to preserve meat, to read the signs of weather and animal movement. Tommy thrived, learning from John, learning from the land, growing brown and strong. His blonde hair bleaching almost white in the sun. He learned to track, to shoot, to speak some of John's language. Words that rolled off his tongue with the ease of childhood. Months passed, then a year. The homestead grew. They added a barn, chickens, a vegetable garden that produced bountifully under Sarah's careful tending. John still came and went, following the seasons and the game, but he always came back. His stays growing longer, his departures growing harder. One night, sitting on the porch they'd built together, watching Tommy chase fireflies in the dusk, Sarah said, "I love you." She said it simply, without drama, just stating a fact like the sky is blue or water is wet. "I love you, John Longknife, and I think you love me too." John was quiet, but not in the cold, distant way of their early days. This silence was warm, comfortable, the silence of two people who knew each other deeply. "I do," he said finally. "Love you. I think I have since that first night, when you looked at me without fear, when you put your son's needs above everything, including your own safety. I think I loved you then, but I was afraid. Afraid of bringing you harm. Afraid of not being enough." "You're more than enough," she said. "You're everything. And if people don't like it, don't approve, then we'll weather that together, like we've weathered everything else." John turned to her, his eyes reflecting the last light of sunset. "Then marry me," he said. "Properly, formally. Let me be Tommy's father. Let me be your husband. Let's stop pretending this is temporary, that we're just friends helping each other. We both know it's more. Let's make it official." "Yes," Sarah said, laughing, crying, both at once. "Yes, absolutely, yes." They married a month later at the trading post. The doctor served as witness. Some of the locals came, out of curiosity or genuine goodwill. There were whispers, of course. Stares and judgment. But there were also people who smiled, who congratulated them, who saw what Sarah saw, that love didn't care about skin color or background or what was proper. Tommy stood between them during the ceremony, holding both their hands, his face serious like he understood the weight of the moment. Understood that they were becoming something new, something that hadn't existed before. A family forged not by blood but by choice, by survival, by love tested in fire. Years passed. The homestead prospered. Tommy grew into a young man who moved between two worlds, speaking two languages, comfortable in his own skin in a way that made both Sarah and John proud. He learned his father's tracking skills, his mother's book learning. Became someone who could survive in the wilderness or negotiate trade deals at the post with equal skill. Sarah sometimes thought about those first desperate days in the desert, how close they'd come to dying, how a different choice, a different direction might have meant she never met John, never built this life. It terrified her still, in quiet moments, how fragile it had all been, how easily lost. But then John would come in from checking the horses, would kiss her forehead with casual affection, and the fear would fade. Replaced by gratitude for every day they had together, for every sunrise that found them still standing, still fighting, still loving. Trouble came, though. It always did. This was the West, violence and hardship woven into the fabric of daily life. A gang of outlaws passed through one summer, hard men running from the law. They saw the homestead, saw a woman and child and an Indian, figured it would be easy pickings. They came at night, 5 of them, torches blazing, horses thundering, expecting fear, expecting surrender. What they got was John Longknife and Sarah Crawford defending their home, defending their family, defending everything they'd built with blood and determination. John's rifle spoke first, dropping the lead rider before they crossed the property line. Sarah fired from the window, her aim true, taking down another. Tommy, 17 now and trained by the best, fought beside them, his shots careful and precise. The fight was brutal, close quarters and desperate. The outlaws had numbers but the family had motivation, had everything to lose. They fought like cornered wolves, like the desert itself had taught them, vicious and unrelenting. When the smoke cleared, 3 outlaws lay dead in the yard. 2 had fled, wounded and screaming into the darkness. The homestead stood, scarred but intact. John had taken a bullet in the shoulder. Sarah's arm was grazed. Tommy was unharmed, his face white with shock but his hands steady. They patched each other up by lamplight, Sarah digging the bullet from John's shoulder with the same steady hands that had once fumbled with flint in the snow. John gritting his teeth and not making a sound. Tommy bringing water and bandages, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who'd learned well. "We should report this to the marshal," Sarah said as she tied off John's bandage. "Tell them what happened before those 2 survivors spin some story about savages attacking innocent men." John shook his head slowly, his good hand finding hers. "No, Marshal," he said, his voice heavy with old pain, old knowledge. "They'll see dead white men and an Indian with a gun. They won't care about the truth, won't care that we were defending our home. They'll see what they want to see." "He's right," Tommy said quietly, his voice hard, wisdom beyond his years. "I've heard the talk at the trading post. Heard what they say about us, about how it's not natural, how you shouldn't have married him. They've been looking for an excuse." Sarah felt rage kindle in her chest, hot and fierce. "So what then? We just bury them? Pretend it never happened? Hope those 2 don't come back with more?" "We bury them," John said, his tone flat, practical. "And we prepare. We fortify. We make sure that if they do come back, if anyone comes, we're ready. We don't rely on law or justice because those things don't apply to people like us. We rely on ourselves, on each other, on being too dangerous to attack." So they did. They buried the bodies deep in an unmarked grave. Dug traps around the property. Installed shutters that could be barred from inside. Stockpiled ammunition and supplies. Turned their home into a fortress they could defend. The 2 surviving outlaws never returned. Maybe they died of their wounds. Maybe they decided the homestead wasn't worth the cost. Either way, the summer passed into fall and they were left alone. But the incident changed things. Sarah noticed it at the trading post, the way conversation stopped when she entered, the way people's eyes slid away from hers. The friendships that had been tentative before evaporated entirely, replaced by cold distance and sometimes open hostility. One afternoon, a group of women confronted her in the general store. The doctor's wife leading them, her face pinched with righteous anger. "It's not right," she said, her voice carrying. "Mrs. Crawford, or whatever you call yourself now. It's not right, you living out there with that Indian, raising your son to be half savage. It's an affront to decent Christian people." Sarah felt her spine straighten, her hands curling into fists. "My husband's name is John Longknife," she said, her voice cold and clear. "And he's more decent, more Christian in his actions than any of you have ever been in your pious words. He saved my son's life, gave everything he had to help strangers. And all you can see is the color of his skin. Your prejudice is showing, ladies, and it's uglier than anything you're accusing me of." The doctor's wife recoiled like she'd been slapped. "How dare you," she sputtered. "We're trying to help you, trying to make you see reason before it's too late, before you're completely ruined." "I was ruined the day my wagon train left me to die in the desert," Sarah said, her voice rising. "I was ruined when your so-called decent Christian people voted to cast out a sick child because they were afraid. I was ruined by the very society you're trying to drag me back to. So forgive me if I choose the man who saved me over the people who condemned me." She turned and walked out, leaving the women standing in shocked silence. She didn't go back to the trading post after that. Sent Tommy instead to do their trading, to be their connection to the world beyond the homestead. John found her that evening, sitting on the porch, her face turned toward the sunset. "You heard," he said, settling beside her. "Tommy told me," he confirmed. "News travels fast. Apparently the whole post is talking about how you told off the church ladies, how you defended my honor." His tone was light, but she heard the weight underneath, the concern. "I meant every word," she said fiercely. "I'm not ashamed of us, of what we built. I won't pretend otherwise just to make them comfortable." John took her hand, held it between both of his. "I know," he said. "And I love you for it. But Sarah, this life, it's only going to get harder. The territory is filling up with more people, more laws, more pressure to conform, to be what they think is proper and acceptable." She turned to him, saw the worry in his eyes. "Are you saying you regret this? Regret us?" "Never," he said immediately, firmly. "But I'm saying we need to be prepared. Need to accept that we're going to be alone in this, more alone than we already are. People will turn against us. Laws might too. We need to be strong enough to stand anyway." "Then we'll be strong," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "We've survived worse than gossip, worse than disapproval. We'll survive this too." Winter came hard that year, snow falling thick and heavy, coating the desert in white, transforming it into something strange and beautiful. Tommy turned 18, took a job helping with a cattle drive that would take him away for months. Before he left, he stood in the yard, his horse packed and ready, his face serious. "I'll be back in the spring," he said, looking between Sarah and John. "But if I'm not, if something happens to me, you two take care of each other, you hear me? You're the best parents anyone could ask for, and I'm proud to be your son." Sarah hugged him tight, blinking back tears. "You come back safe," she whispered. "You come back to us." Tommy hugged John too, a long embrace between father and son. Not by blood, but by every measure that mattered. Then he mounted up and rode off into the pale winter dawn, his figure growing smaller until it vanished into the white landscape. The cabin felt empty without him, too quiet. Sarah threw herself into work, preserving food, preparing for the worst of winter. John hunted, ranging farther and farther to find game that was growing scarce as more settlers pushed into the territory. One night a blizzard hit, sudden and vicious. Wind howling, snow driving sideways, visibility dropping to nothing. John was out checking the traps. Sarah paced the cabin, her worry growing with each passing hour. When he finally stumbled in, ice crusted to his beard, his lips blue with cold, she cried out in relief. Helped him to the fire, stripped off his frozen outer clothes, wrapped him in blankets, boiled water for tea. "You scared me," she said once he could talk again, his color returning. "I thought you were dead out there. Thought I'd lost you." John pulled her close, his arms still trembling with cold. "Hard to kill," he said, attempting lightness. But she heard the truth underneath. It had been close. He'd gotten turned around in the whiteout, had nearly frozen before finding his way back. They held each other that night, listening to the storm rage outside, the walls groan and creak under the wind's assault. And Sarah thought about fragility, about how quickly everything could be taken, how death was always waiting, patient and cold, just outside the door. But dawn came, as it always did. The storm passed, leaving drifts 10 feet high and a world transformed into glittering white. They dug out slowly, carefully, rebuilt what the wind had damaged, and survived another day, another trial. Spring brought Tommy back, thinner and harder, his eyes holding new experiences, new knowledge. He'd seen things on the cattle drive, violence and beauty, brotherhood and betrayal. He was a man now, fully grown, no longer the sick child Sarah had carried through the desert. He brought news too. Talk of the territory becoming a state, of new laws being written, of Indian reservations being enforced, of mixed families being scrutinized, questioned, sometimes forced apart. "They're coming," John said after Tommy finished his report, his voice resigned. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The government, the law, the people who want everyone to fit into neat categories. They'll come, and when they do, we'll have to choose." "Choose what?" Sarah asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Choose whether to fight or run. Whether to stand our ground or disappear into the wilderness where laws don't reach yet. Where we can live free but alone, truly alone." "I won't run," Sarah said, her voice hard. "I won't give up this place, won't let them drive us off land we've bled for, we've built with our own hands. If they want us gone, they'll have to drag us." John looked at her, long and steady. "Then we stay," he said. "We stay, and whatever comes, we face it together, the way we've faced everything." Tommy nodded, his hand resting on the rifle beside him. "I'm with you," he said. "Both of you. All the way." So they prepared. They fortified more, built hidden caches of supplies throughout the property, mapped escape routes into the deep desert where few men would follow. They trained together, practiced fighting as a unit, covering each other's backs, moving like one organism with one purpose: survival. Summer came hot and brutal, the sun beating down without mercy. Sarah worked the garden, sweat pouring down her face, her hands cracked and bleeding from the soil. John and Tommy built a new barn, larger and stronger, its walls thick enough to stop bullets. One evening, riders appeared on the horizon. 6 of them, wearing badges, riding in formation, official. Sarah's heart sank. She called to John and Tommy. They emerged from the barn, rifles in hand, faces grim. The riders stopped at the property line. Their leader was a marshal Sarah recognized from the trading post. A man named Hawkins, hard-faced and uncompromising. He sat his horse like he owned the world. "John Longknife," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "You're wanted for questioning about the deaths of 3 men on this property last year. Witnesses say you murdered them in cold blood. They attacked us." Sarah shouted back. "They came in the night, tried to rob us, tried to kill us. We defended our home. That's not murder, that's survival." "The law will decide that, ma'am," Hawkins said, his tone patronizing. "Longknife, you can come peacefully or we can take you by force. Either way, you're coming to stand trial." John's hands tightened on his rifle. "Over my dead body," he said quietly. "That can be arranged," Hawkins replied, his hand moving toward his pistol. One night, sitting on the porch they'd built together, watching Tommy chase fireflies in the dusk, Sarah said, "I love you." She said it simply, without drama, just stating a fact like the sky is blue or water is wet. "I love you, John Longknife, and I think you love me too." John was quiet, but not in the cold, distant way of their early days. This silence was warm, comfortable, the silence of 2 people who knew each other deeply. "I do," he said finally. "Love you. I think I have since that first night, when you looked at me without fear, when you put your son's needs above everything, including your own safety. I think I loved you then, but I was afraid. Afraid of bringing you harm. Afraid of not being enough." "You're more than enough," she said. "You're everything. And if people don't like it, don't approve, then we'll weather that together, like we've weathered everything else." John turned to her, his eyes reflecting the last light of sunset. "Then marry me," he said. "Properly, formally. Let me be Tommy's father. Let me be your husband. Let's stop pretending this is temporary, that we're just friends helping each other. We both know it's more. Let's make it official." "Yes," Sarah said, laughing, crying, both at once. "Yes, absolutely, yes." They married a month later at the trading post. The doctor served as witness. Some of the locals came, out of curiosity or genuine goodwill. There were whispers, of course. Stares and judgment. But there were also people who smiled, who congratulated them, who saw what Sarah saw, that love didn't care about skin color or background or what was proper. Tommy stood between them during the ceremony, holding both their hands, his face serious like he understood the weight of the moment. Understood that they were becoming something new, something that hadn't existed before. A family forged not by blood but by choice, by survival, by love tested in fire. Years passed. The homestead prospered. Tommy grew into a young man who moved between two worlds, speaking two languages, comfortable in his own skin in a way that made both Sarah and John proud. He learned his father's tracking skills, his mother's book learning. Became someone who could survive in the wilderness or negotiate trade deals at the post with equal skill. Sarah sometimes thought about those first desperate days in the desert, how close they'd come to dying, how a different choice, a different direction might have meant she never met John, never built this life. It terrified her still, in quiet moments, how fragile it had all been, how easily lost. But then John would come in from checking the horses, would kiss her forehead with casual affection, and the fear would fade. Replaced by gratitude for every day they had together, for every sunrise that found them still standing, still fighting, still loving. Trouble came, though. It always did. This was the West, violence and hardship woven into the fabric of daily life. And she felt something shift inside her. "John's right," she said, the words coming slow but certain. "This place doesn't define us. We define it. And if staying means dying, means being separated, then we go. We leave and we build again somewhere else. Somewhere we can be free." Tommy nodded slowly, acceptance settling over his features. "When?" he asked. "Soon," John said. "Tonight we pack. Tomorrow at first light we ride. We take what we can carry, cache the rest for maybe someday, when things change, when the world catches up to what we already know, that love doesn't have boundaries, that family is what you make it." They worked through the night, packing supplies, loading horses, caching valuables in hidden spots throughout the property. Just in case they ever returned. Sarah took one last walk through the cabin, running her hands over surfaces she'd cleaned 1,000 times, touching walls that had sheltered them through storms. John found her standing in the doorway, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and red. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll miss it." "We'll find beautiful again," he promised, standing beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "We'll find a place where Tommy can bring home a wife someday, where there can be grandchildren, where we can grow old watching the sunset without fear, without always looking over our shoulders." "That sounds nice," Sarah said, leaning into him. "That sounds like a dream worth chasing." They rode out as the sun climbed higher. 3 figures on horseback, leading pack animals loaded with their lives reduced to what could be carried. They didn't look back. There was no point. The past was gone, the future uncertain. All that remained was the present, and the people they loved, and the road ahead leading into unknown territory. They traveled for weeks, following game trails and old Indian paths, avoiding settlements, avoiding people. John's knowledge of the land keeping them safe, keeping them moving, always moving. They crossed mountains, forded rivers, survived storms and heat and nights so cold their breath froze in the air. Tommy scouted ahead, finding water, finding game, his youth and strength making him invaluable. Sarah kept them organized, kept them fed, turned their temporary camps into something resembling home each night, no matter how exhausted they were. And John led them, guided them with that same quiet competence that had saved Sarah and Tommy all those years ago in the desert when death had seemed certain, when hope had been a dying ember. He kept them alive, kept them together, kept them moving toward something better. They finally stopped in Montana territory, finding a valley so remote, so isolated that it seemed untouched by human presence. A river ran through it, clear and cold. Mountains rose on all sides, creating a natural fortress. Pine forests thick enough to hide in. Meadows perfect for grazing, for planting. Here, John said simply. This is where we stop. This is where we build again. And they did. They built a new cabin, larger than the first, with a loft for Tommy and space for the family they hoped would grow. They planted crops, hunted deer and elk, trapped furs to trade at a distant post. Tommy met a girl from a trapper's family, fell in love with her quiet strength, her acceptance of his mixed heritage. Sarah and John watched him court her, watched him marry her in a simple ceremony by the river, watched him become a father himself. Their first grandchild born in the cabin John had built, delivered by Sarah's experienced hands. A squalling, healthy boy they named Samuel, after the grandfather he'd never know. Years passed in that valley. Peaceful years, mostly. Years where they could breathe without fear, where they could love without judgment, where they could simply be. They grew older, their hair going gray, their hands gnarling with work and age, but their spirits remained strong, remained unbroken. Sarah sometimes thought about that night in the desert, about the woman she'd been, desperate, terrified, certain she was going to die. Thought about the stranger who'd saved her, who'd become her husband, her partner, her best friend, her great love. You know, she said one evening, sitting on the porch of their Montana cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains, you saved my life that night in the desert. But you did more than that. You showed me how to live, really live. Not just survive, but thrive. You showed me that family is choice, that love is action, that home is wherever the people you love are standing. John took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years. You saved me too, he said quietly. I was dead already before I found you, just walking around waiting for my body to figure it out. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to keep going, gave me a family when I thought I'd never have one again. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge one by one, filling the sky with light. Below them, in the cabin, they could hear Tommy and his wife putting their children to bed. Hear laughter and the sounds of life continuing, of generations being built on the foundation they'd laid. This is what we fought for, Sarah said contentedly. What we ran for. What we sacrificed for. This, right here, this moment. Yes, John agreed. This. Exactly this. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything they'd ever needed, everything they'd ever wanted. Carved out of hardship, forged in fire, tested by hate and prejudice and violence and emerging stronger for it. The desert had tried to kill them once. Society had tried to break them apart. But they'd survived. They'd won. They'd built something that would last long after they were gone, a family, a legacy, a story of love that refused to die. As night deepened and cold settled in, they went inside together, closing the door on the world outside, on the past, on everything that had tried to destroy them. Inside there was warmth. There was family. There was home. And that was all that mattered. That was everything.